Hi everyone, I am Dr. Anisha, your microbiology faculty, and today I'll be discussing about two very important hypersensitivity reactions that are hypersensitivity 1 as well as hypersensitivity 2. And under these two reactions, we will be covering up their mechanisms as well as certain examples and the examples which are very important for your exam point of view. So, firstly, before moving into the details of the mechanisms of these hypersensitivity reactions, we first must know about the meaning of hypersensitivity. So, it is an exaggerated injurious response which occurs in already sensitized individuals following a contact with the same antigen, right? So, firstly, we have type 1 hypersensitivity. So, whenever we are talking about type 1 hypersensitivity, remember the letter A. So, with A, we have multiple things to learn. Firstly, it is allergen induced. Then we must know that it involves anaphylaxis, it involves atopy, and any form of allergic reactions. So let us now take up a small story that class A people are elite people. And elite people, they tend to drive elite cars. And what are those elite cars? Mostly we have Mercedes Benz E-Class. Mercedes E-Class. So let's use this story in the important mechanisms and the associated immunoglobulins. So whenever we have type 1 reaction, remember it is IgE which is coming into play. And whenever IgE comes into play, we must remember that there is going to be a mast cell degranulation. So are we able to derive IgE and mast cells from the story of Mercedes-Benz car? Right? And class A people or type 1 people are always elite. So now, whenever there is an exposure with a soluble antigen, remember there is going to be the role of IgE immunoglobulin. So it is an allergen and a person is already sensitive to that particular allergen. So IgE comes into play. So whenever there is IgE coming into play, it leads to mast cell degranulation. And this mast cell degranulation leads to release of certain mediators which are inflammatory mediators, and these inflammatory mediators are going to lead to certain inflammatory reactions like vasoconstriction, vasodilation, vascular smooth muscle contraction, and all the reactions which are associated with the role of these particular mediators, right? There can be vasodilation, there can be bronchial smooth muscle contractions majorly, and other inflammatory reactions. So now, hypersensitivity type 1, it is present or it comes as a reaction in two phases. One is the sensitization phase, and the other one is effector phase. So in sensitization phase, what is occurring? That the allergen or a foreign antigen is saying hello to the host cell. So it is the first interaction which is occurring with the host cell of the allergen, right? So we have this kind of dose of antigen is known as the priming dose of allergen. And when the subsequent contact with the same antigen occurs of the host, then the name of the dose changes to the shocking dose. And these two phases, the time interval between these two phases is roughly around 2 to 3 weeks. And remember the kind of antigen we are talking about, it is the soluble antigen. Few important points about the reactions. Firstly, we have the soluble antigen. The type of hypersensitivity, it is the immediate type. Then third important thing is that there is going to be involvement of IgE immunoglobulin, right? And is it B cell mediated or T cell mediated? So it is a humoral type of reaction, humoral type of hypersensitivity. So whenever humoral comes into play, it is the B cells which have a major contribution in the mechanisms. B cells, right? So these few important points you must know about type 1 hypersensitivity. So now let us talk about these two phases with the help of the picture or pictorial depiction. So firstly, in sensitization phase, what is occurring? The allergen is saying hello to the host cell. Now the host cell is not really happy with the allergen. He is not very fond of the allergen, right? So now let us see what the host cell does and what all reactions take place when the allergen is saying hello in the form of priming dose. So firstly, there is this allergen. We have this allergen which is presented by antigen presenting cells in the form of peptides to helper T cells, CD4 helper T cells. Now these helper T cells are differentiated to Th2 cells, helper 2 cells, right? And these Th2 cells in turn are going to release certain cytokines. And what is that cytokine? It is interleukin 4. So now this interleukin 4 has an important function of sensitizing or stimulating the B cells. It is going to stimulate the B cell to produce these IgE specific plasma cells. So they will be stimulated to produce plasma B cells and memory B cells. Now these plasma B cells are going to produce allergen specific antibodies, IgE immunoglobulins. This is a very, very important point, that the immunoglobulin E which is produced by the plasma B cells are going to be specific to the allergen. Now these allergen specific antibodies, they will go and coat the mast cells, right? These antibodies are going to coat these mast cells, right? So these mast cells are going to have receptors for these allergen specific IgE antibodies, which are FCER1 receptors. So now This coating of the allergen-specific IgE antibodies on the mast cell makes these mast cells really angry. These mast cells are now angry. These mast cells are also not fond of the allergen, just like it was happening in the very first place in the host cell, right? So now this mast cell is very angry, and now it has become sensitized mast cell because it has been sensitized to the priming dose of the allergen, right? It is very angry now. It is full of anger at this particular point. This is what is happening in the first phase, which is sensitization phase, right? So now let us see what happens in the effector phase, the second phase. Now, since the mast cell is already angry, and in effector phase, the dose name, it is going to be the shocking dose. Shocking dose. Right? So let us see this again with the help of the same diagram. So now we have the sensitized mast cell, which is really angry. And then comes the role or the second exposure of the same allergen. It is the re-exposure to the same allergen. Now, since mast cell is already angry, it is full of so many situational things. So now, in order to curb that anger, it is going to lead to degranulation. Mast cell is degranulating itself and is producing mediators, primary and secondary mediators, to get rid of that allergen, to cause inflammatory or injurious reactions. Now leads to the development of primary or the degranulation of mast cells, leading to the release of primary as well as secondary mediators. So these mediators are released. There's already degranulation happened from the mast cell, right? So what is the role of these mediators? The collective role follows smooth muscle contraction. There's going to be blood vessel dilation, platelet degranulation, then sensory nerve endings would be stimulated, and eosinophils will also be secreted. So this is a collective role of the primary and secondary mediators. So before talking about the role of these mediators, we first must know what are the different types of allergens which can lead to hypersensitivity type 1 reaction. So these can be, firstly, when we talk about food allergies, food items which are very, very common when associated with type 1 hypersensitivity. We have peanuts, any form of nuts, right? Fish. Some people have egg allergy. Then certain pollens. Pollens are associated. Then there can be certain drugs like penicillin, right? So, and bee stings, bee, wasp stings. These all are the allergens, most common allergens which are associated with type 1 hypersensitivity reaction. And the time duration between the development of symptoms from the exposure or the hypersensitivity, it is just between 2 to 30 days. So if in case you have been stung by a bee, the reaction, all of the following reaction, whether it is going to be swelling, blood vessel dilation, smooth muscle contraction, all of that occurs within a span of 2 to 30. It's not days, it is 2 to 30 minutes. So all of that occurs within a span of few minutes only, right? So this is why it is known as a rapid type of hypersensitivity reaction. So now let us look at the mediators now. We have the primary mediators, which are also the preformed mediators, which are present and they are waiting to be induced by the allergen, right? So the primary mediators, for remembering the primary mediators, because you often get confused in the exams, that you're asked about the different type of mediators and you do not know whether these are primary or secondary mediators. So let us learn this with the help of a mnemonic, his high-speed E-car. So I'm obsessed with these car mnemonics. So it is again the Mercedes E-Class E-car, right? His high-speed E-car. So with H, it is the histamine we are talking about. Then we have S, which represents serotonin. And then again H, we have the heparin. So the primary action of these three mediators is increasing the vascular permeability as well as increasing smooth muscle contraction. Then comes A. So E stands for eosinophil chemotactic factor, and its role is eosinophil chemotaxis. It is going to recruit the eosinophils to the site of injury or inflammation. So all of these eosinophils and neutrophils, they'll be recruited to that particular site to cause the inflammatory reactions and all of the injurious reactions. So N also, for N I do not have a letter in the mnemonic, so it is eosinophilic chemotactic factor, neutrophil chemotactic factor. And then we have P for standing for proteases. And the main role of proteases is the bronchial smooth muscle contraction and secretion of mucus, right? And degradation of blood vessels as well as basement membrane. So proteins are majorly, they are causing the degradation of protein material in the cells, right? So these are the functions, these are the important mediators as well as their mode of actions. Now let us move on to the secondary mediators. What are these secondary mediators? Now the ground has been already set by the primary mediators. Now these secondary mediators, these are VIPs and they are going to start the injurious or inflammatory process, right? So what are these secondary mediators? We have platelet activating factor. And the role of platelet activation is of course going to be aggregation and regranulation of platelets and contraction of pulmonary smooth muscles. So platelet aggregation is occurring, their degranulation is occurring, and also pulmonary smooth muscle contraction is happening. Then comes the role of leukotrienes. They increase the vascular permeability as well as they lead to pulmonary smooth muscle contraction. So in all of these situations, the major mode of action is going to be vasodilation, so that there's going to be fluid at that particular site, increased blood flow, increased vascularity, as well as there's going to be smooth muscle contraction, right? Major role is this. Then the prostaglandins, they are going to cause vasodilation and again pulmonary smooth muscle contraction. Along with that, prostaglandins are also going to lead to platelet aggregation. Bradykinins, they are causing increased vascular permeability as well as smooth muscle contraction. And interleukin 1 and TNF alpha, they are responsible for systemic anaphylaxis. So they increase the expression of CAMs on venular endothelial cells. So these are the major mechanisms of these primary and secondary mediators. What you need to remember from these are the important names of these mediators. So let us now talk about the clinical manifestations. So firstly, you should know that there can be immediate manifestations as well as the late manifestations. And immediate can be in the form of systemic manifestations as well as local manifestation. So what is the systemic manifestation known as? It is the anaphylaxis. Anaphylaxis. Whereas the local manifestation is known as atopy. Systemic is involving the whole system of the body. The reactions are going to be systemic. Whereas atopy, it is confined to only to certain tissues or organs, whether it is skin or it can be other important organs. Tissues and organs, they are confined or limited to certain tissues and organs. So these are the immediate type of manifestations. Then late manifestations, they take some time, around say 4 to 6 weeks. They take around 4 to 6 weeks to occur, and late manifestation usually involves the long-term or chronic manifestations of these reactions, right? So anaphylaxis, you've already seen that it can be known as systemic and localized. Systemic stands for anaphylaxis and localized stands for atopy. Now let us discuss about the clinical manifestations associated with hypersensitivity 1 reaction. So there can be two forms of manifestations. One is the immediate, the other one is the late manifestation. An immediate manifestation can also be divided into two forms. One is systemic manifestation, as well as we have local manifestation. What is this systemic manifestation? It is the anaphylaxis. So systemic type 1 hypersensitivity, it is known as anaphylaxis, whereas localized response, it is known as atopy. So anaphylaxis, under anaphylaxis, the reaction or the inflammatory response, it is going to be involving the whole body. It is not just one tissue, which is the case with local response. So atopy, it is confined to certain organs or some organs or tissues whereas anaphylaxis is involving the whole body, right? And these late manifestations, they usually take around 4 to 6 hours to develop, and they can last for 1 to 2 days. And these manifestations are nothing but majorly chronic consequences of type 1 or immediate type of reactions, right? So now let us talk about these in more detail. When we say it is the systemic type of reaction, we are talking about anaphylaxis. And anaphylaxis, most of us are aware of it, that it is an emergency situation. It is an emergency state, so patient is going to have severe dyspnea. There's going to be hypotension and severe consequences because of involvement of, if the bronchial smooth muscles are involved or the tracheal area is involved, it can lead to edema, which can be hazardous, can even lead to death, right? So anaphylaxis is certainly an emergency state which requires immediate reaction or immediate treatment. And what is the drug of choice of anaphylaxis, systemic anaphylaxis? It is epinephrine. It is epinephrine or adrenaline. So localized reaction, it can be, we all know that it is atopy. So firstly, before moving on to the localized reaction, let us again look at the important allergens which can lead to systemic anaphylaxis. I have seen a case of fish anaphylaxis, a case which was stimulated by having fish. So it led to severe swelling in the tracheal area and the eyes, and the patient was not able to swallow for a considerable time. So fish can be one allergen. It is very, very common. It can be seen very commonly in certain individuals that there can be seafood. A lot of people have seafood allergy, certain antitoxins, peanuts, penicillin, and even the sting. Bee stung patients. This can all lead to systemic anaphylaxis. Now let us talk about the localized reaction. So this can be one example of this. There are certain examples. So firstly, let us discuss about two important examples that are asthma as well as hay fever. Hay fever. So what happens in asthma? So it is the second most common atopic reaction. So what exactly is happening in asthma? It is the lower respiratory tract which is getting involved, right? There's going to be bronchial, smooth muscle contraction. Then there's going to be severe edema, increased mucus secretion, increased mucosal secretions, right? And this asthma, it can be intrinsic as well as it can be induced or allergen induced. Intrinsic, it is not stimulated by any foreign allergen, but this can be very well stimulated with exercise and even exposure to severe cold. Whereas allergen induced can be due to any external allergen. It can most commonly involved allergen, it is the pollen, right? Pollen. Then another food articles can also induce, certain food articles can also induce asthma, right? So pollens are most commonly associated with allergen induced asthma. So now let us talk about hay fever. Now hay fever, it is supposedly the most common atopic reaction encountered. And what is the second name of hay fever? It is allergic rhinitis. Allergic rhinitis, where there is exposure of the allergen with the nose and the conjunctiva. So because of this, there is going to be increased nasal secretions, sneezing, coughing. Why coughing? Because in hay fever, the upper respiratory tract is involved, whereas in asthma, it was the lower respiratory tract which was involved. So patient will have sneezing, coughing, as well as with the involvement of conjunctiva, there is going to be increased watery secretions. from the eyes, as well as redness would be seen. So can you now make out that in atopy, it is just few systems which are involved. In hay fever, it is the nose and the conjunctiva, and the upper respiratory tract, whereas in asthma, it is the lower respiratory tract which is getting involved, right? So what are the other atopic manifestations? What are the other manifestations? So there can be allergic eczema. There can be allergic urticaria, right? So these are the most common other allergic reactions. So what is occurring in allergic urticaria? This is urticaria, which is also known as hives. Some of your batchmates might have experienced this hives reaction and you might be aware of it. This is allergic urticaria. So what exactly is happening in urticaria? So any food item, it is stimulating the mast cells which are present in the gut lining, right? So these are stimulating the mast cells which are present in the gut, and these, the degranulation and the mediators, they are taken via circulation to distant site. And what is this distant site? It is the dermis or the skin, where there is going to be development of these reactions. Can you see these erythematous? These are erythematous eruptions, right? So there is elevation in the skin, erythematous elevation in the skin which is present, and it is the gut muscles which are getting stimulated but leading to the reaction in another site which is the skin. So this is known as urticaria. So if in case a question comes with a history, will you be able to make it right? So this is how you would know that this is an atopic reaction. And similarly, we have allergic eczema or dermatitis. So these are small erythematous vesicular. There can be vesicular at times. There can be papillary reaction, which is also known as dermatitis, allergic dermatitis, which can be induced by certain dyes, certain soaps, detergents. So these patients are sensitive to these articles, certain detergents, dyes, hair dyes, soaps, etc. So this is allergic dermatitis, which are the local manifestations of type 1 reaction. And there come the late manifestations. Late manifestations, as we already discussed, these are going to take around 4 to 6 hours to develop, and these late manifestations are going to be present till 1 to 2 days, and after 1 to 2 days they'll subside. So what are the mediators which are involved in late manifestations? So these can be interleukin 3, 5, 8, eosinophilic chemotactic factors, neutrophilic chemotactic factors, right? So all of these reactions, they come into play, and they are certainly leading to certain chronic states, chronic manifestations, right? Now let us look at certain tests which can help detect type 1 hypersensitivity reactions. So the very first test, it is the skin prick test. And in this particular test, what exactly are we doing? We are either injecting intradermally or scratching into the skin of certain antigens. Antigens of potential, doubtful antigens or allergens into these sensitized individuals. So, after this injection or after introduction of this particular antigen, if the person is allergic or sensitive to that particular antigen, there comes a reaction which is the famous Wheel and Claire reaction. Wheel and Claire reaction. And this reaction is exactly which is seen in allergic urticaria, right? The reaction, the erythematous bumps which develop in the skin after a food is ingested or when the person is sensitive to a particular food, this is exactly what we get as a allergic reaction, which is the case with skin prick test as well. So what we are doing, suppose this is the form of the patient. So we are using multiple potential allergens. We are introducing them into the skin of the individual. So what is the advantage of this particular test? That multiple antigens can be detected at one particular time. But one major disadvantage associated with is that now there are certain allergens we are not sure whether that person is sensitive to all of those allergens. So certain new allergens are also introduced, right? So these new allergens have now sensitized the host and which can later lead to development of hypersensitivity if the person is sensitive to that particular allergen, right? So this is one major disadvantage associated with skin prick test. So this test is not very commonly practiced. Nowadays, we have better advanced tests available. So what is the second test? So it is the detection of total IgE antibodies in the sera. And what was the test which was done earlier? It was the radioimmunosorbent assay, which is an obsolete test now, and the other test which is again obsolete, it is the radioallergosorbent assay. Allergosorbent assay. Very important test which is available nowadays, it is the multiplex immunoblot assay, which uses a nitrocellulose strip which is around 54 antigens. 54 antigens adsorbed onto that nitrocellulose. So, this test has an advantage of using so many antigens at one particular time, helping detect the allergies which are present or the host who is susceptible to such particular allergens. Another test which is available, it is the anti-CCD adsorbent IgEs. So if asked in your exams about the reactions which can help detect type 1 or the test which can help detect type 1 hypersensitivity, so these are the important names which you should remember. So now let us move on to the next type of hypersensitivity. It is the type 2 hypersensitivity. So first we have already covered wherein we have spoken about atopy, we have spoken about anaphylaxis, certain allergic reactions and allergen induced. And what was the antibody associated with this type 1 or hypersensitivity? It was IgA antibody. IgA antibodies. Now let us look at type 2 hypersensitivity. So let us take at the look and take the next letter, which is the B. So A and B, these are the first two letters. First two letters are used. So what does this AB stand for? It is the antibody. So this type of hypersensitivity, it is antibody mediated. And what are the most common antibodies associated? These can be IgG antibodies. This is the most common antibody associated with type 2 hypersensitivity, but it can be IgM at times, and in one exception, it can be IgE antibody, which we will discuss in later section. So now antibody is going to lead to the it is going to lead to the hypersensitivity reaction. So now when occurs the antigen antibody interaction, there is going to be development of certain inflammatory states, which are majorly, in most cases, these are complement mediated, and other cells which are involved with type 2 hypersensitivity. One is complement, then we have NK cells as well, and certain autoantibodies as well. We'll see that in the mechanisms associated with type 2 hypersensitivity reaction. So we said that this type of hypersensitivity is antibody mediated. So of course there's going to be an antigen antibody reaction which is going to take place. So what are these antigen which are involved with type 2 hypersensitivity? For that, let us remember this mnemonic red boil. So this mnemonic would be used in the mechanisms as well. So we should remember red boil. So what does red boil stand for? So with R, can we take letter R and use it for RBCs? So can we say that RBC membrane antigens can be used? Then we have the second letter A, which is extracellular matrix or extracellular matrix antigens. Then can we use the letter D for drugs which can act as antigens? Certain drugs which get absorbed, which get coated, which coat the RBCs. And B can be used for blood group antigens. So what are these RBC membrane antigens? These can be RH antigens, right? So these are the important antigens which can lead to the development of type 2 hypersensitivity reaction. So now let us look at the mechanisms which are involved in type 2 hypersensitivity. We have complement dependent mechanism. Then we have antibody dependent cellular cytotoxicity. And then the third one is antibody dependent cellular dysfunction, which is also autoantibody induced. Autoantibody induced. Antibody dependent cellular cytotoxicity, the most important cell involved in this particular type of mechanism, it is going to be NK cells. And when we are talking about the complement dependent mechanism, so it is the classical complement which is getting activated. Classical complement system which is getting activated. So now let us look at the mechanisms one by one. So whenever there is going to be an antigen and antibody reaction, so it is going to lead to antigen antibody reaction. It is going to stimulate or lead to activation of complement. And what happens in classical complement? We are talking about classical complement system. What is occurring in this classical complement system? It leads to certain manifestations. It can lead to cytolysis. Cytolysis stands for cell lysis, cell lysis, which occurs due to the formation of MAC complex. Right? MAC complex is formed by C5 to C9. Right? Then the other manifestation can be opsonization. So what are the opsonins which are released in classical complement pathway? So these are C3b and C5. So opsonins are released which are going to coat the antibodies, which are going to coat the host cell as well, and these opsonins are going to make the host cell or the antigen very tasty, and these will be further taken up by the macrophages for phagocytosis. So this is occurring in the opsonization, right? And the third one is inflammatory reaction. And for inflammatory reaction, there comes the role of chemoattractants. So what are the chemoattractants most commonly associated or are released in the classical complement pathway? These are C3A and C5A, right? Leading to the inflammatory reactions associated with complement, right? So these are the three things which occur after activation of complement, right? So let us look at the diagrammatic depiction of this particular pathway. So suppose this is the target cell. We have the target cell, which is of course the RBC, and RBC has certain antigens, RBC membrane antigens. These can be blood group antigens. So here we have A blood group antigen, right? And there are also certain drugs which coat the RBCs, right? So we have the antigen, and since it is antibody mediated, so these antigens are fixed to the host cells, right? So these are already coated on the host cells. So once antigen-antibody interaction occurs, suppose these are anti-blood group A antigens, and then we have the antibodies to drug as well. So this antigen-antibody interaction is going to activate the complement system. So now the complement is getting activated. So what happens next? So because of the complement activation, take place the three mechanisms. First is the target cell lysis, which is done with the help of activation of membrane attack complex C5 to C9 from the classical complement pathway. So what do these membrane attack complexes do? So these form pores on these cells, pores in the antigenic surface, right? Because of the development of pores, exchange of certain chemicals, mediators takes place, which is ultimately leading to the lysis of the target cell, one mechanism which we've already discussed because of the development of membrane attack complex. Then we have the second mechanism. The second mechanism, which is the inflammation, which is associated, and with inflammation we have the two things or two released chemoattractants, which are C3A and C5A. So that is the second step which occurs in complement mediated cell destruction. And then finally we have the opsonins. Third is the opsonin, which is C3B. So now what is occurring? Opsonins. These are the opsonins, C3B. Now the macrophages, they have the receptors for these opsonins, C3B receptor. So now receptor, the opsonin, they are getting attached with the receptor, which is further leading to the final step, that is the phagocytosis. And this is how the opsonization is occurring. These get coated, right? We have the macrophage, we have the opsonins, which is making these antigens tasty, and finally the phagocytosis is occurring. So this is the mechanism of complement dependent hypersensitivity type, right? Now let us look at the examples of complement mediated type 2 hypersensitivity reactions. So for that, we'll again be using the mnemonic red boil as well as RBCs and platelets. So with the letter R from the red boil, we are using R for RBCs. So whenever there are RBCs, can we say that it is the hemolysis which is taking place? RBC destruction is the hemolysis, right? So can we say that autoimmune hemolytic anemias can be associated with type 2 hypersensitivity reaction? One thing. Then can we use E, the second letter, for erythroblastosis fetalis? And what happens in this particular type of reaction, that Rh negative mother, we have the Rh negative mother who has been exposed with Rh positive blood prior. It can be due to transfusion or it can be due to previous pregnancy. Suppose she had a Rh positive baby in the previous pregnancy. Now she has antibodies to this particular blood, right? Now in this present pregnancy, what happens? So these anti-Rh antibodies will be reactive against, they will cross the placenta and they are going to affect they are going to attack the Rh positive blood of the fetus, Rh positive blood of the fetus. So now the hazardous consequence occurs in this particular pregnancy because the mother has gotten the Rh positive antibodies from the previous infection or previous blood transfusion or previous pregnancy, right? So this occurs in erythroblastosis fetalis. Then can we use the third letter, that is D, for drug-induced reactions, right? When drugs, they coat the RBCs and lead to type 2 hypersensitivity, which we saw in the mechanism of the complement dependent reaction, right? So with RBC, now because we have seen the RH incompatibility, which was seen in RH incompatibility, which was seen in erythroblastosis fetalis, can we now say that there is also going to be ABO incompatibility? ABO incompatibility. So this is the fourth reaction which can happen. ABO incompatibility. Then the fifth example of type 2 hypersensitivity, which is complement dependent, it is going to be thrombocytopenia first, because it is involving the platelets. Thrombocytopenia with the letter P from platelets, right? And then we can also have pemphigus vulgaris, where antibodies are formed against desmosomal junctions, right, leading to destruction of those tight junctions, right? So these are the examples of the complement dependent type 2 hypersensitivity reactions. Now let us come to the second mechanism, which is antibody dependent cellular cytotoxicity. So what do we understand by this? So these are dependent on the antibodies for further destruction. So what happens? Suppose we are already aware that the antibodies, this is the antibody, it has two parts, the FAB portion, FAB sites, and the FC portion of antibody. So now, suppose this is the target cell and it has the antigens. These are the antigens which are present on the target cells, right? So now the antibodies, they are going to coat the target cells. These are going to coat the target cell with the help of their FAB portion. FAB portion, right? So FAB portions are now engaged on the target cell having the antigens. So now what happens? Now certain other cells, important cells like NK cells. So these NK cells have receptors, have FC receptors for the antibodies. Now this antigen, which target cell which has the antigen, which is coated by the antibodies with the help of FAB portions, now this whole complex, they will be getting or they will be interacting with the antibodies on the NK cells, and which is further going to lead to the cytolysis. This is the second mechanism, which is known as antibody dependent cellular cytotoxicity, right? Now moving on to the third mechanism, which is antibody dependent cellular dysfunction. So there is some form of dysfunction which is occurring. With dysfunction, we mean that there is some dysregulation which is occurring in the body. So normal function of certain cells or receptors is deranged. As already discussed, this particular mechanism is autoantibody mediated. Autoantibody mediated. Right? So what is happening in this particular mechanism, that there are anti-receptor antibodies which are formed anti-receptor antibodies are formed inside the body, and these antibodies can lead to either excessive stimulation of certain receptors or inhibition of certain receptors. They can either lead to excessive activation, excessive stimulation, or inhibition. So what are the examples of these type of reactions? So firstly, let us again use a fun mnemonic, which is game spirit. So the first letter GA, first and second letter GA. So we have the first example, which is Graves' disease. And it is leading to activation of certain receptors, excessive activation of certain receptors. So what is happening? So autoantibodies which are produced in Graves' disease are long-acting thyroid stimulators. Thyroid stimulators which are stimulating excessive thyroid hormone production. Excessive thyroid hormone. Right? So as a result, what is occurring? A lot of manifestations of Graves' disease, like there's going to be sweating, heat intolerance is going to be there's going to be diarrhea, then there's going to be cardiac manifestations as well, tachycardia. And this classical picture of Graves' disease, which is a picture type of question, image-based question which gets asked in your exam. It is the exophthalmos which occurs in Graves' disease, where lids are retracted, lids, and conjunctiva and sclera, they are exposed, right? There will be diarrhea and there will be redness as well associated. So this is a classic picture or image of Graves' disease. And also there is going to be goiter present, right? And patient is going to lose weight loss, etc. So these are the classical buzzwords or classical symptoms and signs which are seen in Graves' disease. And why is it getting produced? Why is Graves' disease acting? It is because of the dysregulation of certain receptors or autoantibodies which are produced, which are known as the LATs, long-acting thyroid stimulators. So this is one example of type 2 hypersensitivity antibody dependent cellular dysfunction. Then comes the next two letters, which are, this is example A, then we have example B, which is myasthenia gravis. So M for myasthenia and E can be replaced with I, where inhibition of certain action or receptors is occurring. So what exactly is happening in myasthenia gravis? Let us look at the image. So at normal neuromuscular junction, for the contraction to occur, suppose this is the nerve cell. This is the nerve cell. It releases acetylcholine, which binds with the ACH receptors or acetylcholine receptors, leading to the signal of muscle contraction, right? So now, what is happening in myasthenia gravis? Suppose this is the nerve cell. It is having ACH inside. We have acetylcholine. So now, the ACH receptors, they get blocked by antibodies. These are the anti-ACH antibodies which are formed. These are blocking the site for the attachment of acetylcholine. So these are blocking. So there is reduced muscle contraction because autoantibodies are formed against these receptors. And this is why there is weakness or there is reduced muscle contraction which is present in Graves' disease, in myasthenia gravis. Right? So see, this is the classical picture of myasthenia gravis. Myasthenia gravis, where inhibiting autoantibodies are formed against ACH receptors, which is leading to this classical sign, which is the drooping of the lid. Drooping of lid. There's going to be muscle weakness around the eyes, and in generalized body features or generalized bodily characters, there's going to be generalized muscular weakness. There's going to be abnormal faces, etc. There is reduced muscular contraction, which is the classical picture of myasthenia gravis. So this type of reaction is a antibody dependent cellular dysfunction where inhibiting antibodies are formed against certain receptors, right? So autoantibody receptors are formed, autoreceptors, right? And what are the receptor we were talking about? It was the ACH receptors, right? So this is the mechanism seen in myasthenia gravis. Now let us move on to the next letter, which is P. So P stands for pernicious anemia, where antibodies are formed against intrinsic factor, right? And then we have R, letter R, which stands for rheumatic fever, wherein antibodies are formed against streptococcal antigens, which cross-react with cardiac antigens with heart. And the letter D in period stands for Dil in Hindi. So we can replace it with myocarditis, which is seen in Chagas disease. And lastly, again the letter G, which we are using for another condition, which is the Goodpasture syndrome, wherein autoantibodies are formed against type 4 collagen. So all of these examples of involved or associated with type 2 hypersensitivity or type 1 hypersensitivity are very, very important for your exam point of view. And these are the only questions which you get asked in hypersensitivity reactions and their examples. Mechanism, mostly not everyone is going to ask, but of course examples are very, very important. This was all about type 1 and type 2 hypersensitivity. Thank you.